I recently saw Kala, and I feel that it is one of the best films that I have seen this year so far. But as a filmmaker, there are some things that I really want to discuss and talk about, especially because they've been used so well within the film. I think to analyze any film, we need to break the film into two parts: the telling of the film, which is the narrative, the story of the film, and how do you tell the film, which is essentially the form of the film. Within the form, I think there are three sections that I can divide my observations in. The first is the visual, the second is the audio, and the third is the metaphor.
So Mr. Gandhi wrote ambition ये थी जब बड़ा
कांटों को मुरझाने का खौफ नहीं होता।
The visual is very, very interesting because what Anvita has done is that she has visually linked the emotions of the character to the visual experience of the film. Take this shot for example.
बेटा था।
Do you notice how the colors are shifting as soon as the mother gets the news of the son's death? It's an immediate visual response that gives us a window into what the character is feeling. The same thing is then mirrored later when Kala is finding out that the mother did not respond to the telegram even after she has won what in her head was the epitome of what the mother wanted, the golden record. You can see the brightness suddenly dimming in this shot.
टेलीग्राम भेजा था ना?
The lights dimming down with her emotional graph going down. The same way, and the most obvious use of this is when Jagan enters the house, her personal space, the space that she shares with her mother, and how suddenly day turns into night and all the lights literally go off. The second is how the entire film is so beautiful. Apart from the obvious beauty in terms of set design, in terms of production design, cinematography, what I really love is the fact that the beauty actually adds to the meaning. Look at what Anvita has to say.
You know, the sun will be shining brightly, and the room that you are in will be very pretty, and your heart will be breaking, or your mind will be cracking. So the world continues to be beautiful around you, and terrible things can happen. And that is something that I like to capture.
What Anvita is doing is creating a contrast between the beauty, the external beauty of the character versus the internal isolation that she is feeling. And suddenly these two things, when you put them together, creates a distance, emotional distance that the character is feeling, and essentially what we also feel. Because we are hooked onto the character's emotional journey, yet the visual journey that we are on is a different kind of visual journey. And the contrast and the estrangement comes through beautifully just by this small decision. She's also, like all filmmakers, using the camera to this effect. Take this shot for example. Do you see how shifting from a regular normal lens to a wide angle lens suddenly emphasizes the hand and emphasizes the movement of the hand, and it makes you feel that power that the mother has over her psyche, over Kala's psyche, visually. And you see this framing changing again and again throughout the film whenever Kala is feeling the burden of her mother's influence on her mental health. You can see that the camera shifts to a wide angle, distorted image, which makes us feel that distortion which is within her mind. Now let's come to the audio part of things. By audio, I don't mean the music. The music is beautiful, the music is very well composed, but I want to talk about the sound design. In a film about music, where the subtext is music constantly, what I love is the use of silence in the film. How silence is used in the film is very, very interesting. And you can hear the silence, like in this shot. Or maybe this one. Do you feel it? Do you hear the very small sounds that come from her jewelry and the cup touching the saucer? These small sounds feel heightened because think about what happens when you are in a very silent space. The really small sounds start growing louder and louder, especially with the ambience of the entire space. The sound design mimics that feeling, mimics the feeling of vulnerability that you get when your senses are at its peak. This is how Anvita is putting us inside the character's mind. Literally, when we can feel her vulnerability every time the silence plays its role. Now let's come to the metaphors and symbols. There's the obvious metaphors of the snow, which is a direct symbol to depression. Every time she feels, she remembers the trauma of the death of Jagan, it starts to snow, and visually we can see her emotional life come within the frame itself and become part of the form of the film. The second is the use of the gargoyles. The gargoyles are a very interesting metaphor because they come thrice in the film. The first time when she comes out of the house when Jagan has moved in, and you can see the gargoyle right next to the maze. So the second time she is making a decision with respect to the ugliness in her own life, then suddenly we see that the gargoyle is increasing in the importance within the frame. That essentially is building up to the ugliness that is building up within her, and how her character is also changing. The third is then the metaphor of the maze, which she finds herself with along with Jagan right outside the house. The maze has a very interesting ending because the mercury that she uses comes from a tiny wooden maze that she literally breaks open to let the mercury come out, which essentially is also a metaphor of how the dilemma that she's facing, the multiple choices that she has to make, she's able to break out of those dilemmas literally as well as metaphorically. Another beautiful metaphor, which I think is a homage to the origins of filmmaking itself, is the use of the zoetrope, which is essentially the precursor to the modern camera, film camera. So the images that you can see behind her actually reflect the kind of thought processes, and especially the speed and the kind of shadow and light play that is happening within her thoughts. You can see it again in the conversation that she is having with Jagan. Now this conversation is actually the pivotal moment within Qala's development as a character, because the moment where Jagan suggests to her that she should think for herself, this moment is when the shadows stop, and for the first time she is able to think clearly and makes the decision to go and record the song and actually do a good job for herself. And then we come to the moths, like Anvita says.
So there's a tiny detail in the costume and in the production design. There are moths everywhere.
The moths are everywhere. You can see the moth on the sari. You can see it in the dream sequence. You can see it literally come as a element within the frame itself. And the moths also are a visual extension of what she's feeling inside her own head. Or this frame from the dream sequence, which is essentially a Rorschach test, which is a psychological test that you do to determine the mental sanity of a person. So suddenly the audience is questioned. This decision that she is going to make, what is the morality of this decision? That is a very interesting metaphor that is being used in the film itself. Now let's come to the story itself, the narrative side of things. Essentially, it's a mother-daughter relationship, and a lot has been written about it already. What I really want to point out is the nuances of where the characters are coming from. Like the nod to Homai Verawala, who is the first woman photojournalist of India. The same way how Majru's character is based on Majru Sultanpuri, and how you can see reflections of Kumar Gandharv in Jagan's character. Kumar Gandharv actually plays a very interesting role within the film. So, at the end of the dream sequence, and the dream sequence has a lot of influence coming from The Black Swan, which is a film by Aronofsky, where a same kind of transition is seen within the character, where a good girl transforms into a bad person, or has to transform into a bad person within the film, and how the dream sequence along with the feathers that the dancers are using are paying a tribute to that idea of the black swan. In the same way, the song that Jagan is singing, which is the song made popular by Kumar Gandhar, which is a Kabir Doha, which says "Ud jayega Hans akela." The idea of the Hans again gets literally translated into the idea of the black swan. If you look at Kumar Gandhar's life, he actually contracted tuberculosis, and for a period of 7-8 years he was not able to sing. So it is also very interesting foreshadowing, not just in terms of the story, but in terms of the layers of meaning within the story itself, where if you know about Kumar Gandhar, suddenly all of these influences add up. If you know about Black Swan, you can see the reflection of the Black Swan within the film, which makes for a much richer viewing experience, especially something that really hit me when I was watching it. What I really want to talk about, and I feel that something that really shocked me, was the ending of the film. It did not shock me in terms of what happened. So if you look at the story itself, you can see the foreshadowing of the death of Qala right when she was born. When the mother, in the POV shot, in the point of view shot, the mother is literally strangling her. The same way in somewhat as the natural progression of the character's arc, you can see that the character is heading towards self-destruction. And the mother plays a big role in that destruction itself. The second idea that I really hit me was the fact that why do we like Qala as a character? Because if you think about what she has done, especially with Jagan, who is actually a positive character within the film itself, you can see that she has done exactly what her mother did to her, resulting in Jagan's death. So in the end, when Qala dies, what really hits me is not the fact that she has died, but what really hits me is how the death has been treated within the form of the film. What does it mean? Right after Qala dies, there are these two shots. All the beauty has been taken out of the frame. It almost feels like it's a documentary shot. You see a very similar shot of Jagan also post his death. In terms of form, it feels like a completely different film. So you think about the ending, and then you look at the entire film. The film has so many layers, has so many interesting metaphors. A lot of things like the zoetrope has been said so subtly. Suddenly the spectacle of the death makes it feel as if all the layers have been taken out of it. If you think, again, I don't mind the visual juxtaposition of Jagan's body hanging off the tree versus her body hanging off the fan. Her hugging Jagan's leg versus her mother hugging her legs. All of that is fine. But the change of form in these two shots, for me, affected me a lot. I was thinking about it for a long time, and then it hit me that actually it's a larger argument about, as a filmmaker, what to show and what not to show to the audience. Suddenly the form of the film, which you have now emotionally lashed onto, suddenly becomes very, very real. Suddenly the change in form makes that trauma resonate with you in the real world rather than in the world of the film itself. And that for me is the real moral question with the film. Because for me, that is something that is definitely dependent on the artist's interpretation and what the filmmaker wants to show and how to show it. But at the same time, it essentially is celebrating the trauma of a character beyond what the film itself had called for, which for me feels very, very wrong, or at least deserves a trigger warning. So please write down in the comments what you feel about the film, what you thought or felt when you saw these two shots. And if you like the video, please do share, like and subscribe. Thank you so much.